We've got a charged atmosphere for two rivals in the East Division. It's the Moonshine Throwdown. Marshall and Western Kentucky.
Intercepted by Key, and Key has one man to beat. A nice cut move. Edwards can't get him. Key takes it all the way. A pick six for Devin Key.
Here comes Talik Keaton to the sideline midfield. He's to the 40, gets a block, and here's goal! Touchdown, Marshall!
So please join me in welcoming the 21st head coach in WKU football history, Tyson Helton.
And Marshall's going to finish the year 9-4 and champions of the 2018 Gasparilla Bowl, the sixth consecutive bowl win for the Marshall Thundering Herd.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. Excellent week for Western Kentucky. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Steven's going to be a little bit late to the party, so we're flipping the script this week, and we're going to lead off the episode with the preview of Marshall's game against Louisiana Tech, which is a huge game in Conference USA. Arguably, some could say the game of the year for Conference USA. We'll talk about that here in just a moment. But, you know, as a little bit of a teaser, we're going to talk about that big win for Western Kentucky over SEC team Arkansas, which was quite convincing and didn't ultimately solely lead to the firing of Arkansas's head coach, but I'm sure it had something to do with it. So stick around for that in the latter half of the season episode once Stephen can join the party. But right now, Trace and I are going to talk about Louisiana Tech coming to Huntington to face the Herd in so many storylines in this game, so much on the line. I really don't know where to start other than to say the power index has gone down this past week, Trace. It was up there around the 63% Marshall favor. It's gone down just a little bit. Power index likes the Herd in a little bit more of a coin flip this week, 56.1% chance to win. And Marshall is now just a 2.5-point favorite. So this game's turning into a little bit more of a coin flip as the week goes along. We'll see where it's at come game day. Louisiana Tech, 8-1 on the season, 5-0 in conference, currently riding an 8-game winning streak. They are red frickin' hot. The all-time series, this is kind of little weird tidbit that I came up with. The all-time series between Louisiana Tech and Marshall tied 1-1. A lot of history there between these two teams. Louisiana Tech took the first game all the way back in 1942.
Sheesh.
26-0. And the two teams would not meet again until the 2014 Conference USA Championship game that was played in Huntington in a drizzly, dreary, cold, crappy weather game that the Herd came out on top 26-23. So, Trace, historically speaking in this game, if you get to 26 points, you're going to win. Both teams have won with the score of 26. So we'll see if that holds true this week. Louisiana Tech, I know you've got some stats to kind of curb some of these numbers, but right off the top, I'm just going to give the season averages and such. Louisiana Tech scoring a lot of points this year. 38.1 points per game. They're only allowing 22.9, whereas the Herd scoring just over 26 and giving up 24. Louisiana Tech gains a lot of yardage, but they give up a lot of yardage, Trace. They're gaining 479 yards a game, 292 of those through the air. They're allowing, though, a lot of yards as well, 390.8 yards per game Louisiana Tech gives up, and 254 of those are through the air. The Herd gaining 425 yards, almost 426 yards per game, 224 of those through the air, rushing for over 200 yards as well. Marshall just giving up 371 yards, 237 of those through the air. So these two teams defensively give up pretty close to the same amount of yards, just a 19-yard difference between the two. Now, here's the kicker. Both teams are allowing under 140 rush yards per game. So it's kind of strength on strength and weakness on weakness as far as defense goes. So we'll see kind of how that plays out. Now, the big disparity, of course, is points per game. With all those yardage all the yardage being gained by both teams, it's kind of wild that Louisiana Tech is good for 12 more points per game. So before you give me some tidbits and thoughts on the game, let's talk about a little bit what's on the line for this game. Number one, what's on the line? This is Sacred Saturday. Of course, this is going down on Friday night, so I guess you want to call it Sacred Friday. Herd's honoring the 75 victims of the 1970 plane crash. This is a big one. This is the one that you must win if you're a Marshall coach. I think you mentioned that Doc Holliday had said that in a press conference. Yep. This is just a different week in Huntington. They'll have the fountain ceremony. It'll be a very emotional week. They'll break out the blackout uniform. Just a different aura in the stadium for this game. It's not one you really want to have to play the Herd when it's on Sacred Week, we'll call it this time. Also on the line, this is potential for home field advantage in the Conference USA Championship game should both teams make it. Marshall, of course, is a half a game behind FAU in the standings, but that's because the Herd's off a bye week and FAU played, but the Herd does still own that tiebreaker, so should both teams continue to win out, Marshall would get the nod. So this does have the makings for a potential home field advantage game. Louisiana Tech's basically got the West locked up. This also has bowl pecking order on the line with Conference USA. We all know how Conference USA loves to do that. The order of finish, best record, kind of gets their pick of where they want to go and all that kind of stuff. So this is kind of a big game. This will keep you amongst the top two in bowl pecking order. And there's a tale of 2 win streaks on the line here. Something's got to give. Louisiana Tech riding that 8-game win streak, the Herd riding a 4-game win streak. So somebody's going to have their streak come to a grinding halt. And of course, I mentioned maintaining the tiebreaker over FAU. Of course, they need to win. The Herd does to keep pace with FAU, not just keep the tiebreaker in place. A loss really puts Florida Atlantic in the driver's seat in the East. So Trace, now that I'm done rambling on, before we get to stats, I'd like for you to talk about this week. I'd like for you to talk about this game, and give some insight to our listeners about the whole thing, not necessarily just Louisiana Tech, the opponent, but for what this week means for the Marshall program, the community, the fan base, the players, the alumni, everything. I know you got the goods. Let's hear it.
Whew. Oh, man. I was thinking about it, that there's a lot of storylines and a lot of different ways to look at this game, head into it. And I think there's more now after you said all that stuff. I mean, there is so much that goes into this game. I mean, I didn't think about it like this, 8-game win streak versus 4-game win streak. I didn't think about it like that. And then, of course, conference title game, home field advantage potentially. And then both teams trying to keep pace in their respective divisions. Just there's a lot of stuff going on, but I mean, of course, the most important thing is the fact that Marshall's honoring the 75 victims. I mean, that's always going to be the most important thing. Doc said it in his press conference this week. He said his players understand the significance and understand the responsibility that goes into playing this game. And I think that's definitely the case, because since Marshall's actually made a focal point to do this game up every year real big, this honoring the 75, and they go all out, since they've done that, the first time they did it was 2013 at Tulsa on the day of the actual crash. They won that game kind of with some late game heroics in that one. But since that game, including that game, Marshall's 6-0 in plane crash anniversary games, and their average margin of victory is the score of 40-17. So they handle their business on this game, and that's what you have to do. This is a game that you can't afford to lose. I mean, if you lose with all the stuff that goes into this game, it's a bad look. I mean, I know Louisiana Tech's a very good team, but it almost is to the point where it doesn't matter who Marshall plays on this date, they have to win. It doesn't even really matter who it is, because I said last year when we did the podcast for the game last year against Charlotte, which was the anniversary game, and I said I don't think there's a bigger must-win game in college football than when Marshall honors the 75, and I still think that. I mean, I don't think any team in the country can say that there's any game that quite is as meaningful as this one. I mean, no, there's not anybody else that has a game like this anywhere. So it's just a big deal. And, thinking about some of those wins that Marshall's had in the plane crash anniversary game over the last few years, Louisiana Tech's by far the best team they'll play in that stretch by far. I mean, they've played a couple pretty good teams. I mean, they beat Rice in 2014. They were 8-5 that year. They beat Middle Tennessee in 2016. They were 8-5. But most of the teams have just been kind of meh, okay, average, or even less than average. So this is by far the best team Marshall will play. So the power or the spiritual effect or whatever you want to call it is really going to be tested in this game because Louisiana Tech's a really good team. I mean, that's just how it is. I mean, now are they – and right now, as a matter of fact, they're ranked 30th in the AP poll and 28th in the coaches poll right now. So, like, they're on the fringe of being possibly ranked if they can keep winning. So, I mean, but on the side of that, and I've seen a lot of people say it on Twitter, talking about Louisiana Tech's schedule has not been the hardest so far this year. And looking into that a little bit closer, I would agree with that because I found one website, one outlet, I don't even remember what it was, but it was ranking the strength of schedules, and it has Marshall's strength of schedule thus far at 93 and Louisiana Tech's strength of schedule thus far at 121. So
out of 130, right?
Out of 130. So there's only, nine teams that have a weaker schedule according to that website. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're a very good team, but I mean, they've only beaten one team with a winning record this year, and that was Southern Miss. And Marshall's beaten two teams with a winning record this year. So I mean, they beat bad teams the way that a very good team should beat bad teams. They blow teams out, but they should blow out. So I'll give them that. But like, other than Southern Miss, they really haven't been challenged. I mean, even Rice took them to overtime, so they're hardly undefeated, or not undefeated, but they're hardly unbeatable. So I don't know. This is a really big game. I mean, this is one of the biggest regular season Marshall games in a long time, in my opinion. I mean, it's getting bigger and bigger really as it gets closer to the game day. So there's a lot going into it, but hopefully Marshall can pull it out because there's a lot at stake, way more at stake than just the game of football. So.
Well, look, you mentioned that average margin of victory during these games. That's 23 points. That's a very lopsided margin of victory. So it goes without saying that Marshall plays on another level when these games come around. And I don't envy Louisiana Tech. You know they know what's going on. And you know that is also probably in turn amping their players up an extra notch to be the team that goes out and beats Marshall during this week when nobody's been able to do it in, 6 years that you mentioned there. You talked about beating up on bad teams and I'm looking at the Louisiana Tech schedule right now, and you're right. You meant 121 out of 130. Now, they had an opening week loss against number 10 Texas, and after that, they've ripped off, of course, 8 in a row, and those 8 have been Grambling, Bowling Green, FIU, Rice, UMass, Southern Miss, UTEP, and North Texas. Now, they've played their best 2 teams of the year within the last 3 weeks, or within the last 3 games, in case they had a bye week in there somewhere. They did put 45 points up against Southern Miss, and they just put up 52 against North Texas. Now, look, you can say what you want about the record and strength of schedule, but if you rip off 8 in a row, you're a good team.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you can have an off week and lose to a decent team, or you can just have, an off week and lose to a bad team. Those things happen. So you don't win 8 in a row by accident. You have to have something going on. And let's talk about that. I'm going to talk about some players to look out for. We're going to get some keys to victory. And then, we'll move along to that 200 proof player and get a score prediction. So look, it all starts with the quarterback with Louisiana Tech, like it does most teams. It's quarterback Jamar Smith. He's been around forever. He's a senior. The 6'1", 218-pounder. He's having a really good year. Arguably the front runner for, Conference USA MVP or Offensive Player of the Year. I mean, I know Mason Fine's putting up big numbers down there in Denton, but, it's not really translating to a lot of wins. And if Louisiana Tech happens to pull out the conference or at least go to the conference title game, and Jamar Smith has a big rest of the season, it could be him. 198 out of 304 on the season. That's 65% completion percentage, man. 2,483 yards, 14 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions. Also another 75 carries for 226 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Running back Justin Henderson, 5'10", 218-pound junior. 109 carries on the year, 712 yards. Get this, 14 touchdowns on the ground. Yeah,
wow.
6.5 yards per carry. Now I've got 4 wide receivers that I've written down here, and that's because all 4 of these guys, they spread the ball around really well. All 4 of these guys have at least 385 yards receiving. So the most has 482, the least has 385. So between the 4, they all are within 100 yards of one another. Wide receiver Adrian Hardy, the 6'2", 200-pound junior, leading yardage receiver, 39 catches, 482 yards, just 1 touchdown, good for 12.4 yards per reception. Wide receiver C.J. Powell, 5'7", 173-pound junior, leading receiver in receptions, 40 receptions, 457 yards, also just 1 touchdown, good for 11.4 yards per reception. And here to me is these 2 guys have to be the 2 outside receivers. They have to be. Wide receiver Malik Stanley, 6'3", 212-pound senior, just 25 catches, but for 450 yards and 3 touchdowns, 18 yards per reception. He's leading in yards per reception. And then the 4th wide receiver, Griffin Herbert, the 6'3", 217-pound sophomore, 22 receptions, 365 yards, 4 touchdowns, good for 17.5 yards per reception. Herbert is the leading receiver in terms of touchdowns. So you got 4 receivers all leading a different category amongst the receivers. So say they spread it around. Yeah, that's a little bit of an understatement. How about defensively? Just a couple of guys that I wrote down. Linebacker Colin Scott, the leading tackler, the 6', 231-pound senior, 54 total tackles on the season, 24 of those solo, just a half a sack though. Safety L'Jarius Sneed, 6'1", 193-pound senior, 47 total tackles, 26 of those solo, 1 interception, and 3 passes defended. Look, I didn't want to write down a bunch of guys because Louisiana Tech defensively, they have 7 guys with 40-plus tackles. So I could have wrote down a whole bunch of guys. Here's a couple of notes as a team because, we for the past few weeks, month or whatever, we've been talking about the sack run that Marshall's been on, and we've been comparing those here lately to team totals for these their opponents. Louisiana Tech's no different. They've only got 17 sacks as a team, so that's not really a strength of their defense, but they do have 11 interceptions as a team, and I think Marshall has like 2. So, they're not getting to the quarterback, but they are pretty efficient at getting the turnover. One final note there, place kicker. This could be a really interesting matchup between Louisiana Tech kicker Bailey Hale and Herd kicker Justin Rohrwasser. Hale, the 5'11", 196-pound senior, he's 12 of 14 on field goals on the year, along with 50 and 43 out of 43 on extra points. So 2 quality kickers going up against one another in this game could easily be the difference in the game. So with all those stats, all those players, it's easy to see that they run the ball pretty well. They spread the ball around offensively. You can't really just key in on one receiver. Defensively, a lot of guys are making a lot of tackles. They're really good at getting turnovers, and they've got a good kicker. So what does the Herd, in your opinion, have to do to get a win and end this 8-game winning streak, put a pretty good stranglehold on the East, potentially lock up home field advantage should the Herd make the Conference USA championship game, and honor that 75?
Well, first thing I wrote down was keep Jamar Smith in check. Hold him in check. That's what I wrote down because I feel like I've said it God knows how many times that Marshall secondary can be a liability, and it has been a liability at times this year. So even though Louisiana Tech has a potent running back from what you said there, all those touchdowns and a lot of yards and everything, I feel more confident in their ability to stop Louisiana Tech's running game than I do to stop their passing game because I think Smith is a really good quarterback. I think he's easily one of the, 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in the league for sure. So I feel like if Marshall can at least hold him in check, keep him in check, and just do a decent job, a decent enough job, would have probably be better than decent, but a good job of containing their passing game. I think that really will bode well, especially, with the cold temperatures and stuff. Maybe the offenses won't get going quite as much. Who knows? But I think if they hold him in check, then that's a really good start for the defense, because they're going to have to do that. They can't let him go out there and torch him. And, I mean, they can't let him go out there and run all over him either. But you can't – with Louisiana Tech, they're balanced and they're too good of an offense that you can't take away everything they do. You just have to try to take away one thing. And I think Marshall's best case would be to take away the pass, because I have more confidence in their front seven to stop the run. So we'll see how that goes, but that would be a big a benefit for Marshall's behalf there. Next point is Marshall has to have their most second half points all year long of any game they played in all year. One of the last couple games I said they need to have their most third quarter points. I think it was the Rice game, and they didn't. So now I'm forgetting the third quarter. I'm saying the entire second half. Marshall's got to have their most second half points as they've had all year. And I think that the most they've had so far this year, I mean, I'm not counting the VMI game, but I think the most that they've had since then against actual FBS competition has been like 14, I think. Something like that. So they're going to need to at least match that, maybe 17 points, maybe 21. I don't know. I really think they need their most second half points all year, or at least get the highest amount they've had so far, at least 14. You can't, I don't think that Louisiana Tech's not going to slow down for Marshall. They're not going to take their foot off the pedal. Marshall's going to have to go step for step with them. So they got to have, in my opinion, at least tie the most second half points they've had all year, but I really think it'd be better if they just had the most in general. Next point is, and I haven't said this one in a while, but I wrote down turnover-free game. Because if you look at it, the one game Marshall's lost in conference at Middle Tennessee, who's not a very good team, Marshall lost because of 4 turnovers. We all know that. We've seen the case of Marshall losing games because of turnovers quite a bit over the last few years. But in the last 4 games that Marshall's won, 4-game winning streak, they have a total of 1 turnover. It's just so blatantly obvious that Marshall wins games when they don't turn the ball over, and they lose games when they do. I mean, it's just the most simple thing in the world, but the stats back it up. So that has to be the case again. If they go out and have a lot of turnovers, they're absolutely toast in this game. Because Louisiana Tech, like you said, very adept at getting interceptions, very adept at turning turnovers into points. Obviously averaging, upwards of 30 points per game. So Marshall can't afford to give them a bunch of extra chances. I mean, turnover free would be perfect, but you just can't go out and have a lot of turnovers. So turnovers, just generally speaking, but will be good. But of course, no excessive amount of turnovers. We'll just say. My final point is take advantage of the circumstances. There's a lot of things going in Marshall's favor in this game. It's a plane crash anniversary game. Everybody knows what that means for Marshall. Everybody knows how they play. They play at a different level for that game. And then it's a home game. And they had a bye week, while Louisiana Tech is going to be on a short week. Okay, like this, Marshall, we know how sucky, flat out, to be honest, sucky they have been after buys in the past. So you can't, for the plane crash anniversary game and a game of this magnitude, if you come out and look like that in this game, sorry, it's over. It is over. You can't have that. I mean, you have to take advantage of all the things Marshall has in place for them for this game. They have a lot of things in their favor. Marshall's fresher. Louisiana Tech just played Saturday, and now they're going to have a short week to go on the road, cross country essentially, to Huntington, West Virginia. On a Friday night, cold, freezing temperatures, probably going to be up, mid 30s at kickoff or so. I mean, that really, there's a lot of things. Marshall has a lot in place if they can just take advantage of the circumstances. They can't let it go to waste. They have a lot of things going for them in this game. So, got to take advantage of all of them, in my opinion.
Well, all good points. And, I really didn't think about the cold, but that can be an advantage for the Herd. And, they've got to at least spend a little bit of time outdoors practicing in that weather.
Yeah.
And actually turning that into an advantage. Can't just stay in the Chris Klein Center all week long and stay warm and toasty, because you're not going to use that to your advantage at all. And that's an excellent point. I did not even think about the second half scoring, even though we harp on that every single week and how it's basically non-existent. And I think you're absolutely right. It has to be there, and it has to be there in the biggest output that they've had all year long, discounting VMI.
Yeah.
Look, for me, the Herd's going to win if they do these things. And I mentioned that both teams are very stingy against the run, essentially 140 rush yards per game. I think the Herd's got to run Brendan Knox to freaking death down the throat of Louisiana Tech. In the cold, this is a perfect pound the rock type of game. Just gut punches. You remember how Stanford used to do that gut punch kind of offense to where, it might not come to fruition a lot in the first half, but by the second half, they had softened up that defense and they were gaining big chunk yardage in the second half of games. And I think this might be the type of thing that Marshall might have to do, even if it's not working early on. You just can't go away from feeding a runner like Brendan Knox, who can be held in check for a long time and then just break freaking loose for 100 yards and a quarter, and get you 2 or 3 scores. I think he's going to have that 25 to 30 carry type game, and they're just going to have to feed him and feed Sheldon Evans and anybody else they've got to feed, to kind of keep the clock moving while also gaining yards, while also keeping Louisiana Tech off the field. Number 2, I think the secondary is going to have to play their absolute best game of the season.
Yes.
And this might be a little bit of a call out. They haven't been as stout as they should be. Taking into account what we talked about preseason, we talked about the players. They've had some troubles where some players are no longer around that were really big contributors. Some guys just haven't had the season that they were expected to have. And all of that needs to go away. This is the week that a lot can be forgiven if you come out and have a dominating performance. And I think no matter if it's dominating or not, it's going to have to be the best, most disciplined, clean performance of the season to try to slow down this, spread it around Louisiana Tech offense. And number 3, I say it several times a season, and I think it's really going to hold true in this game. I think the Herd's going to have to, I'm going to double dip on this one. I think the Herd's going to have to win the hidden 10 minutes of this game and have plus 5 minutes at least in time of possession, in order to really have a legit shot here. And number 4, I've got like an A, B, C, D bullet point here. This is just kind of a all-encompassing mindset type of attitude point. You're going to have to come into this game and play with a chip on your shoulder. Being that you're a 2.5-point favorite doesn't mean anything. Louisiana Tech is a good team. You're going to have to play like the underdog because, let's face it, they're 8-1. You're 6-4. 3. Yeah, that's right. 6-3. You're not you're not the true favorite. They've got more wins than you. You're going to have to do things like play through the whistle, not to the whistle. Give that extra effort. Have that we're playing for the 75 mindset. When you get tired, you're not really tired. You know what I mean? You just take a deep breath, you get your butt up off the field, you line up, and you hit somebody again. That's just the way it's got to be. And I know a lot of these guys are really tough dudes, but most of the time, you've got an extra gear that you don't think you have a lot of the time until you really need to access it. And that's that week. This is that week. Offensively, it's all gas all game long. Doc Holliday cannot start to run clock in the second quarter of this game and expect to win against Louisiana Tech. You think Skip Holtz doesn't want to get one back from Doc Holliday after he beat him in the Conference USA Championship game in the final 2 minutes of the game? Like, Louisiana Tech had that game.
Yeah. And
it took a, final late fourth quarter drive by Rakeem Cato to get the late touchdown, which was basically Marshall's only touchdown or something like that. I mean, the
first one since I think the second quarter.
Yeah, the kicker was the MVP, for crying out loud, of the Conference USA title game in 2014, Justin Haig.
Goat.
And you said the most second half points. I think to add to that, Marshall's going to have to score points in all 4 quarters. Mm-hmm. It's something that they don't really do because they don't really score a lot in the second half. So, this is a kind of, like I said, A, B, C, D, E type thing, but all of these, it's a mindset attitude thing this week, man. If you're not amped up for this game and ready to give your absolute best effort, then why are you even putting on the helmet? Why are you even putting on the black jersey? I mean, it's going to be special. They're going to have a killer intro, I'm sure. like they always do.
Yep.
So, it's just going to have to be the best game Marshall has played. And historically, you mentioned it, these weeks are the weeks that they generally play their best games of the year. So let's move along. Who's your 200-proof player this week for Louisiana against Louisiana Tech?
Yeah, I'm rolling with Conference USA's leading rusher, Brendan Knox. I've seen a really cool thing on Twitter today. Actually, I think Doc might have mentioned it in his press conference this week that Brendan Knox, of course, he's number 20. The player that wore number 20 on the 1970 team is also from the exact same city that Brendan Knox is from. I thought that was really cool. And I feel like that's going to be kind of one of those hidden spiritual things that seem to happen for this game. And I feel like Brendan Knox could have in line for a huge game. I feel like little things like that, they're you would think they're just coincidences, but then when it's this game and this week for Marshall, do you think it's probably more than a coincidence? And I feel like that's one of those things. So I really think Brendan Knox is going to have a big game. I mean, he's got 933 yards, so he's very close to 1,000, and I think he will eclipse 1,000 in this game. I really think, even though Louisiana Tech's been pretty good against the run this year, they haven't faced Conference USA's best running back so far. So I want to see what Knox can do against La Tech, and I think he's going to really answer the challenge. He always does. And especially in a game like this where it's going to be cold, like we've said, cold, kind of probably rugged game at times, I feel like that's going to lend itself to big things for Brendan Knox. So I'm going to say Knox is my 200-proof player.
Well, Brendan Knox is also my 200-proof player. And yes, you kind of stole a little bit of my stat there. Yeah, he needs 67 yards to top 1,000. I like him to actually try to get closer to 1,100 in this game. That would be 167 yards. Probably need to find the end zone 2 to maybe 3 times. And you said Louisiana Tech has not faced a rusher like Brendan Knox in conference. I'm going to take that a step further as well. They've also not faced an offensive line like Marshall's got.
I was going to say that.
In conference. So cold weather, gritty, strong offensive line, unbelievably dangerous runner. That is a recipe for success for the Herd. And, I tell you what, that number 20 thing, that's just one of those, I don't know. There's always something like that when it comes to this game for the Herd, some crazy tie-in to that 1970 team. And that's a pretty wild one. So Brendan Knox from Columbus, Ohio, by the way, that's just wild. I never would have even thought to look at something like that, but
yeah,
he's my guy too this week. We'll see if Brendan Knox can hold true and get a bunch of the yards for the Herd and lead him to a victory. How about a score prediction, Trace?
Oh, yeah, this is a big one. I'll be honest. If it wasn't the plane crash anniversary game, even though Marshall was at home, I probably would pick Louisiana Tech. I'll be honest. But since it's the plane crash anniversary game, and since Marshall plays usually their best game of the year on this date or this week, I'm going to say Marshall wins. I'm going to say Marshall wins 31-27. Louisiana Tech, they can be had. They can be. They're a very good team, and they've arguably been the best team in Conference USA this year. But they're not invincible at all. They've had some closer games this year. Rice took them to overtime. They haven't played a real tough schedule. Marshall's been tested more than they have. They're more battle tested. But even with that, all that being said, you can't discredit anything Louisiana Tech has done this year. They're a really good team with a pretty complete team that has a lot of talent at all positions. And that's just credit to Skip Holtz and what he's built there. They're kind of like Louisiana Tech's kind of like Marshall in the West Division of Conference USA. They're kind of always that 7, 8, 9 win bowl-ish team. And then they always are kind of flirting with potentially reaching the title game. Louisiana Tech's played for a couple of conference titles, lost. Marshall's played for a couple, won, of course, as La Tech knows all too well. But this is a just massive game. It's massive for Marshall's program. It's massive for Marshall's just history and tradition. This is a game that you just can't afford to lose. I understand, if they played like Alabama or LSU on this date, that there would still be people that said Marshall has to win the game. That's just how meaningful this game is. And the same can be said this time as well. But not only for the 75, but that's the most important thing by far, but for conference title implications, for just conference everything implications. This is a huge game because if Marshall loses this game, FAU would have the edge at that point in the East. Marshall would have to win out and hope FAU loses one more game. But if Marshall wins, they're in the catbird seat. They're sitting pretty with 2 games left against 2 teams that they should beat. Knock on wood. So this is, big time. So I'm going to say Marshall wins 31-27, although it could be a little lower scoring than that, but we'll see. I don't know. I don't really care what the heck the score is as long as Marshall wins on this day with all the circumstances. I don't care if it's 2-0. Just get the win.
Just get the win. So, the Herd likes to say we play for championships. If you want to play for championships, these are the games you have to win first.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned in the lead-in, I said that you score 26 points, you win this game, historically in this whopping 2-game series. Well, you score 26 points, you're going to lose this game, in my opinion. And I've got the Herd winning in a close one, 31-26. I think 26 points is going to be the score that loses this week. For all the reasons that you said, if this was not the plane crash game, I would not feel good about the Herd's chances, but I think they've got just enough of amperage in them this week. Just enough things are going to be in their favor that they can win another tight one. The only thing that we haven't talked about, we've talked about all the things that are going for Marshall. The only thing that goes against Marshall is that
bye week.
It is a bye week, yes. But as far as attendance goes, it's going to be cold. And the thing that really, really stings them is that Huntington High School has a high school playoff game at like 7:00 away. So that'll be a big chunk of the fan base that won't be there, unfortunately. So, might not be as rowdy as it otherwise would be, but, hopefully there's still a good turnout. Hopefully the students come out in droves and, can provide an electric atmosphere for the Herd. So we'll see if they can get it done and put a stranglehold on the East. So hang with us on the other side of this break. We're going to get Steven in here, and we're going to talk about that awesome, dominating performance by the Toppers. They went down to Fayetteville, Arkansas, and beat the mortal dog snot out of those Razorbacks, 45-19. Hang with us. We're going to relive it all. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast.
Red, it doesn't matter if we win or if we lose. It's not even about how we play the game. What matters is that we play the game. That we take the field, that we suit up on Saturdays and we keep this program alive. We play the game. Red, and I'm telling you, one day, not today, not tomorrow, not this season probably, not next season either, but one day you and I are going to wake up and suddenly we're going to be like every other team in every other sport where winning is everything and nothing else matters. And when that day comes, well, that's when we'll honor them.
All right, we're back. Steven has joined the fray. We're going to talk about this big, huge, dominating performance that Western Kentucky had over Arkansas. I mean, I didn't see 45-19 coming. As a matter of fact, in the preview episode, I picked the Toppers to lose the game because I was a little gun shy because of the fact that they had turned the ball over so much the previous couple of weeks. And I said that I would gladly eat the crow if I was proven wrong, and I'm proven wrong, and I'm glad to be wrong because that means Western got the win. But I'm going to take it a little bit of a step further. The last 2 times I've bet against Western to win, they've won. So maybe I ought to just pick them to lose the rest of the season and get Western to 8 wins and call it a day. So let's get Steven in here. Let's talk about this game, and we'll go over some stats and all that good stuff. I got to figure this is a really good graded game for the Toppers in Steven's mind. So, Steve, come on in here. Let's talk about it, man. 45-19. Toppers now 6-4, 4-2 in conference. Great way to finally wrap up the out-of-conference portion of the schedule as you try to get a little momentum to finish out the last couple games and move up the bowl pecking order a little bit, so to speak. So let's talk about Arkansas, man.
Yeah, well, first of all, Shout out to Andrew Jackson, man. They're supposed to be SEC. Man, we put a good old smack on them. Granted, they're not a very good team. And kind of in the past, in our history, when we beat UK a couple times, they were not very good. When we beat Vanderbilt, they were not very good. It's still an SEC win in their place. I mean, and then they turn around and fire their coach the next day.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take that all day, every day. Great win. Obviously, the storyline leading up to the game was Ty Story returning to his former stomping grounds, kind of a little bit of a personal vendetta that he wanted to, kind of just wreak a little havoc in his own backyard. He's from right up the road there, high school legend, a lot of state records. Our preview of the game, I said, he's going to have to step up and shoulder this game. Be the guy that is the guy, play a clean football game, and just go get that victory. And then our first 5 possessions of the ball game, touchdown after touchdown after touchdown, Lucky Jackson, Ja'Cour Pearson, Ty Story himself for a couple touchdowns. I mean, we couldn't do much wrong there in the first half. I think it was 35-7 at halftime, and I was already wanting to make an edit to my score prediction because, man, we were clicking. And, man, Arkansas is garbage. I swear, they were wow. I feel bad for the coach. Obviously we are familiar with the coach getting fired in that 2-year window. And I know that guy was a good recruiter. I feel like he could have done better things in the future. But, you got to show progress. You got to show – that you're building towards that getting better. And, obviously the pressure came down when you take a beating to a CUSA school that had lost to Central Arkansas at the beginning of the year. That fan base was not happy, and rightfully so. But hey, for us, good win, albeit not a highly ranked or, a difficult win by any means. It's another win in the left column. Made us bowl eligible, although I think the consensus is that we're going to have to get to 7 wins to guarantee a bowl game. If we go on a skid and end with 6-6, I won't feel too good about it with that Central Arkansas loss. So good win, awesome game, and really hope we take that game as a kind of a learning from the previous 2 games. And let it be kind of the momentum changer and have a really big, strong finish to the season because we've still got a tough slate of games. We could still lose them all. We could win them all. And I'd like to see us win a couple of them. So, man, great game. I loved it.
Yeah, I'm not going to take anything away from them by saying Arkansas is a garbage team because even though they're a bad team, you still got to go out in I don't know if it was a hostile environment, but it's an SEC type environment. You're away in a somewhat of a marquee game. I mean, let's call it what it is. You can't tell me that the guys weren't amped up to go down and get the win in what was a very winnable game anyway. So what? They took care of business. Arkansas didn't. That's the way the cookie crumbles. So what it means is now is the Toppers are bowl eligible. To me, this was their most complete game as a team so far this season. And that's something that you kind of like to see right now when you're going to go down the stretch and try to get 2 more dubs to close out the season. You mentioned the Ty Story revenge game. Just a little bit of a personal note there. Yeah, this had to be big for him. He wanted to go out and, like we said in the preview, prove that he made the right decision by leaving Arkansas and coming to Western Kentucky. And that came to fruition. So about the actual game itself, you mentioned it was 35-7 at halftime. I mean, this was all Western Kentucky all day long. My 4 points to victory came pretty much true in this game. I'm going to go back and rip some of those off. I said they had to have no turnovers to win. I mean, they had one, but they still won the turnover battle. The secondary must be disciplined. They did that. Devin Key gets a pick 6 for touchdown. I said they might want to try to catch Arkansas asleep with a little creativity. We did see some creative play calling that went for big plays and scores. And then I said the Toppers had to play with swagger, and 45-19 says to me that they were playing with some swagger. So I got the score prediction wrong, but I got the keys to victory right. And they ultimately proved that they were the better team that day. Total yards, time of possession, first downs, turnovers, all swept by Western Kentucky in this game. They outgained Arkansas 478 yards to 340. They outpossessed the Razorbacks 36 minutes, 57 seconds to 23 minutes, 3 seconds. That is a massive, that's 12, almost 13 minutes of time of possession. Actually, almost 14 minutes time of possession. 23-12 first down advantage and a 2-1 turnover advantage. This was just simply all Toppers all day. Leading stat grabbers for the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers, Ty Story, 22 of 32, 213 yards, 1 touchdown through the air. Another 17 carries for 77 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground, earning him Conference USA Offensive Player of the Week honors. QBR rating 93.2. This was probably, like I said, the most complete game Ty Story has played. No turnovers, really. The stats didn't really blow you away, but, man, he was efficient. That's what you like to see. Gage Walker, great day. 23 carries, 129 yards, 1 touchdown on the ground. That brings him up to 912 yards on the season, Steve. I think you're going to have a 1,000-yard rusher by the time the season's over. That's a really, really good sign for the future. Ja'Cour Pearson, big day through the air, 10 catches, 120 yards, and that 69-yard touchdown. And Lucky Jackson continuing to have a solid latter half of the season, 7 catches, 73 yards, landing him on the Biletnikoff Award watch list as a mid to late season ad. So I'm glad somebody is taking notice nationally of what Lucky's doing, because, we're preaching about it week in and week out. So it's good to see that somebody else is looking too. Defensively for the Tops, Devin Key and Kyle Bailey, both 7 tackles apiece. Key 3 solo, Bailey 2 solo. And Devin also had that pick 6 it was a 25-yard pick 6. Landed him Conference USA Defensive Player of the Week honors. And Kyle Bailey also had 1 pass defended. Corey Munson, solid game, 1-1 on field goals, 6 of 6 on extra points. I mean, it was just a great win. I'm glad they had this complete game, complete all-around effort. I mean, I just can't say enough about it. A very, very convincing win. So let's talk about some grades. I just got a feeling I'm going to see not necessarily a 4.0, if not pretty damn close to it. So let's talk about the grade you got for Ty Story this week.
Yeah, Ty Story, man, that man gets an A+. He put the team on his back. In the first half alone, I think we went for it on 4th down like 4 or 5 times, and almost every time was a scramble with him just grinding the hard yards, man. I mean, he was just working. Then a couple rushing touchdowns, and then he had another one where he was, at the half-yard line. If he had just extended the ball, he has 3 rushing touchdowns. So an efficient passing game. I think I don't know if he has enough attempts because he didn't start the first 4 games, but I think he's the leading completion percentage leader in Conference USA if he is eligible by the end of the season. He's near 70% completion for the season. Just a great game, great story. He had a lot of friends, family there. I think I read somewhere that his teammates gave him upwards of like 100 of their ticket vouchers. I think they get 3 apiece. So a lot of guys chipped in and helped him out so his family could get there. Just an awesome moment. I mean, you saw after the game he hung out, was, hanging out with his former teammates and players and the coaching staff, and then went and saw his family on the sidelines. I mean, he really kind of deserved that game after his prep career, and then spending 4 years there at Arkansas and just getting beat up for a couple of years and kind of thrown under the bus as, he's not a good player. When really it kind of boils down to they didn't have a good team. They didn't have a good offensive line. And definitely he earned that victory and kind of got to show those Arkansas fans what they're missing out on by letting him get out of there this last offseason. So A+ for Mr. Story, well-deserved.
Yeah, no doubt. I don't want to derail this grades thing real quick, but I want to speak to that Arkansas thing you were talking about. And, he was kind of thrown under the bus, told he wasn't as good as, he was made out to be. And then, go back in there and just lay the beat down on this team. The coach gets fired. There's been a flurry of decommitments here since the game has taken place. I saw just today that not one that's very surprising, but apparently, the head coach, a former head coach's son, is a 4-star quarterback that was obviously committed there. I mean, it stands to reason that he is now decommitted, but I've seen several guys, come across the timeline that are leaving Arkansas. So, not exactly an ideal situation in Fayetteville. And it's unfortunate that Ty Storey was getting probably more than his fair share of criticism. So excellent decision made coming to Bowling Green for his final season. So how about the offense as a whole? 478 yards, 45 points. Holy moly. I mean, what can you say?
Yeah, I mean, it was just clicking. I mean, everything was just working to perfection. Ja'Cour Pearson had a big game, a couple big catches. Lucky Jackson had an amazing sideline catch and just an all-around good game. Jock Sloan had a good game and touchdown. Gage Walker, great game. The offensive line was getting pushed on that SEC defensive line. But just all around great game. I mean, the offense obviously put up a ton of yards, ton of points. I mean, I can't give them anything but an A. I mean, they earned it. They put it all together. They'd only hit 30 points one time this season, and then they go out and do that, on the road. And you talked about the environment earlier. It wasn't maybe a hostile environment, but there was a pretty good crowd there. I was actually surprised when they panned the crowd how many people were there for a team that's not very good and not winning a lot of ball games. So it was a good crowd. I'm sure they left early. Wasn't really paying attention after halftime, but man, the offense did what they need to do, and hopefully we'll see more of that. A for those guys.
So, yeah, we're talking about all these quote-unquote skill position guys putting up numbers, but one note that I've got to talk about along with this offensive grade is the topper offensive line, because in the preview we talked about – I mentioned that there were like 4 guys along that defensive line for Arkansas that accounted for 13.5 of their 18-team sacks. And if you go down the defensive statistics for Arkansas in this game, not one quarterback sack was allowed by this topper offensive line. So add them to the excellent effort put forth as well. It doesn't show up really in the box score unless you're looking in the Arkansas sack column, but there it is. Of course, 129 yards for Gage Walker, another 77 for Ty Storey. Speaks to how well they played on a different level. But, to fend off this really good defensive line all day long for Arkansas, good job, topper offensive line. How about defensively?
Yeah, I mean, the defense gets an A as well. I mean, short of a couple big plays by Rakeem Boyd, who was an explosive playmaker coming into the game, they really kind of kept everything in front of them, never felt in danger of them, letting Arkansas make big chunk plays. I don't know how many sacks we had, but I know we were constantly pressuring the quarterback and getting good hits on him. So even though statistically it may not look like, Juwan and D'Angelo made a big impact in the game, those guys were chasing those quarterbacks for their life, because they ended up playing at least 2 quarterbacks. So definitely a good game for them. Held them to a low amount of points and yards and first downs, and just kind of did what they wanted all game. And then add in the Devin Key pick 6 as kind of the cherry on top. Great game, great effort, and an A from them again.
Yeah, I really didn't look at any of these Arkansas statistics, but once you mentioned Boyd, I'll go take a look at it. And he had a pretty good game, only 8 carries for 185 yards. That's pretty solid. But you mentioned sacks as a team for Western. They had 2, 4 tackles for loss. I mean, only 57 total tackles, so there really wasn't a whole lot of plays being ran by Arkansas. That in and of itself speaks to the success rate of this defense. So how about special teams this week against Arkansas?
Yeah, just solid performance. I mean, I don't think we punted a lot, obviously not in the first half. And in the second half when we did, I mean, Haggerty did what he had to do. Munson put it through the uprights, didn't shank anything. Never was really kind of tested. So just good game for them. Got to give them an A. They did what they had to do. Didn't cost us any points of the game by any means. So right now we're looking at A's across the board so far.
Yeah, only 3 punts on the day, and Haggerty had a 48-yard average. Punts and kicks combined, there was only one return, and it was for 12 yards, so there's really not much to go off of. So, A's a fair grade. Nobody did anything wrong, and everybody did everything right, basically. Okay, coaching effort this week. I'm seeing a trend here. I'm guessing the A train keeps rolling for the grades this week.
Yeah, A definitely keeps rolling. I mean, Coach Elton was dialing up some good plays. Coach Ellis was as well. Both of those guys said that, Story kind of had that look in his eye pregame that, he was ready for this game, and they just kind of rode him, dialed up some good plays, went for it, gambled, several times on fourth down early in the game that could have, blown up in our face, but they were just riding the momentum. And then Clayton White, just another solid defensive effort. And I saw that he got added to an award for assistant coaches, the top assistant coach of the year. So like we said earlier in the season, it's going to be hard to keep him around if he keeps getting all this recognition. He's done a good job in his third season with the unit. So just an A for the guys. I mean, they all came, did their jobs, and executed very well. So A for the coaches. Yeah,
no doubt. They had them ready to play for sure. The award you're talking about is the Broyles Award, and I was about to mention that, and you beat me to it. So, Clayton White is going to be, I would imagine, a hot commodity at season's end. It just depends on, if he feels like moving on from Bowling Green, because there will be opportunities there for him, I would imagine. Overall, though, I mean, great effort, defensively, offensively, and special teams. What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, just going to take a blended average from all the other grades. We're going to give them an A. Anytime you go on the road, SEC country, and get a big, commanding victory, just a no-doubter like they did. You can't ask for much more, especially at this point of the season. And just kind of getting that burden of, are we going to be bowl eligible off their back? And then still, several tough games left that, they probably needed that confidence boost and kind of seeing how well that they can play when they're executing. Now that they've got a couple weeks to get ready and hopefully put together another solid effort and what's sure to be a tough matchup here in their next game. So A, and hoping it leads to bigger and better things to end the season.
Straight A's across the board this week, much deserved, very accurate grading. There's not much more you can say. This one's got to feel really, really good. Toppers now, of course, are on a bye week this week, so they got 2 weeks to rest up, prepare, get healthy, and get a great game plan ready to go down to Hattiesburg and play Southern Mississippi, which to me is the tougher of the remaining 2 games. I have not been worried about Western playing Middle Tennessee all season long. Preseason, week 1, even after the Central Arkansas debacle, after the struggles through the early season and then the success of the midseason and, the setbacks here late, nothing has caused me to worry about Middle Tennessee when they close the season out in Bowling Green. To me, the 8th win hinges on the next game because I think 7's in the bag. And that, I hope that doesn't come back to bite me. Maybe I should say that Western's going to lose the last 2, so they'll win the last 2 for sure. So here's the big question. What do we know about Western Kentucky after 10 games and after the most complete game of the season?
Yeah, I think now we know what their offense can be. What Helton is building to, and whether that comes to total fruition this year. We've seen glimpses of it. We've seen inconsistent play. But when they play clean football and execute and take what the defense gives them, they can be a really, really good offensive team. And then the defensive side, they just are what they are. Top 25 scoring defense team now. So doing what they've got to do, just night in, night out, giving us a chance to win, no matter who the opponent is. Really, we just got to show up and play good, clean football. And there's definitely more victories to be had if we just show up and play like we have now shown we can play continue to put full games together and run off a little winning streak here to end the season.
Yeah, I'm not sure that Southern Mississippi is going to be as easy of a game as Arkansas was, but we do know now that we shouldn't just be clamoring for that 30-point plateau. We know that that the Topper offense can go well beyond 30 points. I mean, that's 50% better than 30. We're at 45 now. So we know as long as they take care of the football that a good called game and some execution will lead to some points. I mean, how often do you see nearly 1 point scored for every 10 yards of offense? I mean, it was 478 yards, 45 points. That's pretty damn close. I mean, you get an effort like that for the next couple of games, and it's 8-4, no doubt. So, but here's what I know. I know that they're bowl eligible. We said in the preview, let's get that taken care of so we can exhale and stop worrying about that. Now it's just how high up the pecking order can we get? How good of a locale can we land in a bowl game? Because we know Conference USA has some cruddy ones. I mean, Western's already had to do the Bahamas thing. I don't think they want to do that again. So there's going to be. I've seen some opportunity that some P5 schools might not be able to fill, or conferences might not be able to fill all of their tie-ins. So there may be some shuffling around to land some of our conference's better teams in games that we may not thought we would have been in. So let's secure that 7th win and 8th win and see where it falls. You might land up somewhere really good in a very, very cool matchup. We'll just have to see how it all falls. But like I mentioned, Toppers are on a bye this week, so there is no preview. We'll talk about Southern Mississippi in a couple of weeks. So rest up, get healthy, and we'll see you in Hattiesburg. All right, let's get out of here this week. Good win for Western Kentucky. Looking for a big win for the Herd this weekend. Get that stranglehold on the Conference USA East Division and sew up all those other things we talked about. And, of course, the most important thing, like you have reiterated many, many times, get that win for the 75. That's the biggest thing in Huntington this week. So take us out of here this week, starting off with some final thoughts. Trace, you're the man.
Yeah, I mean, it's every year that this game comes around, the mood kind of just changes with the program and with the team and the fans. That you can just tell the mood just changes, and for good reason. I mean, this is by far the most emotional week of the year for Marshall football, and probably just Marshall University just generally. I mean, because the crash, it went way beyond just football. I mean, it took its toll on Huntington as a whole. It took its toll on Marshall University, the school. It took its toll on Marshall's football program. I mean, it took its toll on everything. And it's an emotional week. And to Marshall's credit and to Doc Holliday's credit, he has helped, or they have taken the emotion and harnessed it into good emotion to where they have gone out and played well on this game. And hopefully that trend can continue. I mean, I don't know if it's going to be tough because, I mean, like I said, I think Louisiana Tech is definitely the best team that Marshall has played since the plane crash anniversary games have begun in 2013. I think they're the best team out of what will be 7 teams now that they've played. I think this will be the best team they've played so far. Are they unbeatable? Are they invincible? Absolutely not, because we've said it all, about their strength of schedule has not been real good, how they've looked vulnerable at times in certain aspects. So I think this is the game Marshall can get. They're going to have to play probably their best overall game of the year to do it. But what better game to play their best overall game of the year than the plane crash anniversary game where they wore the black jerseys and the black pants and they wore the 75 decals on the helmet? What better game to play their best game of the year than this one? The answer is there isn't one. This is by far, I mean, that's what Doc said. It's like the most important game, their biggest game of the year. I mean, even if you get to a conference title game, I mean, this game right here is more significant than even a conference title. That's how big it is. So they really need to take advantage of that because, like I said before as well, they have a lot of things going in their favor in this game. The circumstances, everything around it is favoring Marshall. So hopefully they can turn that into a win. And there's always weird little things that happen during this game. It seems like I remember in the 2015 game where it was the 45th anniversary, it was so eerie because Marshall scored a touchdown, went up 7-0, and and it was 11. The clock was set at 11:14, and it was 7-0. So it's like 11:14:70. Like that's just so weird. I mean that's one of those things where it's like coincidence. No, I don't think so. I think there's more to it than that for that game, and that little stuff like that. And then like Knox being the same number as the guy that's from the 70 team that was from Columbus as well. So like stuff like that, like. Those aren't just coincidences, and like hopefully that ends up helping Marshall, pays off in the end. Not to get too spiritual about it, but hopefully that's where it leads to, because I mean they need this win badly for the 75 primarily, and just for the everything surrounding this game and how big of a deal it is and how much focus they put on it. So we'll see.
Well, there's nothing wrong with getting spiritual about this game, because it is. If you go to Marshall, or if you're affiliated with the school or program or whatever, it's part of your fabric as well. And it should hit you a little bit differently this week than any other week. And it comes at a good time for Western Kentucky to have a bye week, because this is the one week that I will gladly, openly, and wholeheartedly set this rivalry aside and declare that this week we are all Marshall fans, because it's just a special kind of thing. It's something that you don't ever want to see happen to any program ever. And I think Marshall will happily carry that load of being the only program that something like this happens to, because you just don't ever want to see it again. So this is the week that everybody can be a Marshall fan. Everyone. And it's going to be a good game this week. I like the Herd in an effort that we haven't seen all season long. I hope that Doc Holliday steps aside and allows Tim Cramsey and his offense to just put up as many points and yards as they possibly can. Just let them cut loose and show what they can do this week of all weeks. Maybe he's been, pulling the reins in a little bit all season long, waiting on this game. Who knows? But there's a lot going in the Herd's favor. I hope they're able to capitalize on the extra rest, get a few guys back that may not have otherwise been able to play had this game, been on a regular week. And I hope they've got a great game plan. I know the guys will be fired up. And to the point that you made, that Doc Holliday's done a good job of taking this, annual event and turning it into positive motivation and positive results. I like to point to the fact that every year in the spring, they take that run up to Spring Hill Cemetery. And that is just a really, really great gesture, and probably one of the finer non-game day traditions that you'll find in college football, and possibly in all of sports. Yeah. That's just really, really cool. And I remember when that happened the first time, I thought, wow, I was not expecting something like that to happen. I don't know why that never occurred to me. But when I saw it, I thought, wow, that's really cool. That's really, really a nice touch. It's first-class move. So here's hoping to a big Herd victory this weekend. Toppers, get rested up, because you've got to finish strong. See if you can move up the pecking order in Conference USA Bowl for a better bowl locale. Let's put it that way. So let's see if we can get to that 7th win, maybe that 8th win, and we'll see how the chips fall. So let's get Steven in here, and we'll get his final thoughts, and then we'll get out of here for the week. So, Steve, what you got?
Yeah, just another week. Glad that we've kind of turned around and played clean football, like we've kind of been talking about for 2 weeks now. That a lot of turnovers are going to equal losses, no matter who you're playing. And both Marshall and FAU are good enough teams to capitalize on those turnovers. Went to Arkansas, handled business. Got a week to get off, game plan, get healthy, and hopefully kind of put the same thing together. We know how good we can be. Glad that Western was able to be the lone CUSA team to beat a P5 school, even if it was a terrible P5 school. I'm sure we're not the only team that's played a terrible P5 school this year, but we got a victory for the brand. And And hopefully, we continue to kind of pull some upsets, the little shockers to end the season. And like you said, get a good bowl game somewhere. Hopefully in the United States, hopefully somewhere close. I'd love to go. But that's all going to depend on where it ends up at. So another good game. Looking forward to hopefully the team getting healthy and everybody come back and playing, upset and spoiler to Southern Miss here in a couple of weeks.
So about Western Kentucky and my final thoughts this week, here's what I know. They just got a $1.5 million check written to go down there and get a dub. And then here in about, less than a month, they're going to travel, or Arkansas is going to travel to Diddle in a hoops game. And we'll see if they can go 2-0 against those Razorbacks and, take that free money and get a couple of wins and move on down the road a little bit. And me, you're talking about bowl games. Hey, I'm 20 minutes from one, so if Western Kentucky happens to land in the Gasparilla Bowl, your boy will be going down Del Mabry Highway to Raymond James Stadium and watching a bowl game. And maybe if they land back in the Cure Bowl in Orlando, I might go back to that as well. Boca's only 4 hours away. I talked to my wife about the possibility of maybe going to New Orleans if Marshall or Western lands in the R&L Carriers Bowl or whatever that bowl is up there. So if it's anywhere close, I'm going to try to get to the game. And if Lord help me, if both teams land in a bowl game in Florida, that's going to be a busy holiday season. But I don't know. All I can say is great win. We've got a big game that we've talked about a lot coming up on Friday night. In my opinion, should be considered the Conference USA game of the year. You got the East leader, you got the West leader clashing in the regular season. This could be a great game. All the storylines we talked about in the preview, there is so much on the line. Everybody should be tuning in for that one because it has implications for both divisions and everybody in the all the upper tier teams in the conference, really, because it plays a lot into the bowl pecking order. So on that note, let's get out of here. So until next week, Steve, take us out.
Go Tops.
Trace.
Go Herd.
We will see you next week. That's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. Later.